The Vampire King's cold fingers still tingled from where they had touched her warm human skin, but when he opened his eyes after their first kiss beneath the street lamp, she was gone, not walking away, not running, but vanished as if she had never existed at all. Gavril Yavorov stood motionless in the empty alleyway, his white hair catching the harsh glow of the flickering light above. 7 seconds. That was how long the kiss had lasted. 7 seconds that had upended 3 centuries of careful control, of measured existence, of ruling the vampire courts with an iron fist that had never trembled until her lips had met his. He reached out to where she had stood, his pale hand passing through empty air that still held the faint warmth of her presence. The scent of vanilla and something uniquely her own lingered, mocking him with its sweetness. "Zara," he whispered, tasting her name on his lips for the first time since she had spoken it an hour before. Zara Finch. A human woman with dark curls that fell past her shoulders and eyes that held flecks of gold when the light caught them just right. A woman who had stumbled into his world completely by accident, who had looked at him without fear when she should have run screaming, who had listened to impossible truths about vampires and ancient courts and blood bonds as if he were telling her about the weather. He had walked the earth for 312 years. He had built an empire beneath the cities, had unified the fractured vampire clans under one rule, had executed those who challenged him and rewarded those who served with loyalty. He had tasted the blood of thousands, had known countless faces and names that blurred together across the decades. But in 3 hours of conversation, in a quiet coffee shop that was about to close, Zara Finch had become the only thing that mattered. And now she was gone. Gavril's eyes, usually a pale crystalline blue, darkened to something closer to midnight as he reached out with his senses. He was the Vampire King. His power stretched across continents, connected him to every vampire who had sworn fealty to his throne. He could find anyone, anywhere, if they existed in his world. But Zara was human. She existed outside his network of blood and ancient magic. She existed in the mortal realm, where his power held no automatic sway. He pulled his black coat tighter around his frame and began to walk. The streets of Prague stretched before him, winding and medieval, holding secrets in every shadow. This was his city, one of many he ruled from the darkness. If Zara had simply walked away, someone would have seen her. If she had gotten into a car, there would be cameras. If she had fled from him deliberately, there would be a trail. But there was nothing. By dawn, Gavril had checked every camera in a 6-block radius. By the following evening, he had questioned every vampire in the city, had sent his most trusted lieutenants to canvass the human population, had used every resource at his considerable disposal. Zara Finch had not checked into a hotel. She had not boarded a plane or a train. She had not used a credit card or accessed her bank account. Her apartment across the city stood empty, exactly as she had left it before meeting him that evening. "It's as if she never existed," said Dominic, Gavril's second in command. His own white hair pulled back in a severe knot. They stood in Gavril's private chambers beneath the city, in the ancient castle that served as the heart of European vampire government. "Are you certain she was real? Some of the older witches can create remarkably convincing illusions." Gavril's hand moved faster than human eyes could track, slamming Dominic against the stone wall with enough force to crack the mortar. "She was real," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I tasted her breath. I felt her heartbeat. I heard her laugh." He released his lieutenant, stepping back, forcing control over the chaos roaring through his veins. "Find her! My lord! We've searched everywhere in Prague. If she's not here, then search beyond Prague. Search every city in Europe. Search the world if you must." Gavril turned to face the ancient maps spread across his desk. Maps that showed not just geography, but the territories of vampire clans, the locations of blood banks and feeding grounds, the safe houses and sanctuaries that existed in the shadows of human civilization. She's somewhere. Humans don't just vanish. But even as he said it, doubt crept into his mind like poison, because Zara had vanished, completely and utterly, as if the universe had swallowed her whole. The first year of searching nearly drove him mad. Gavril abandoned his throne room, delegated his duties to his council, and walked the streets of every major city in Europe himself. London, Paris, Berlin, Rome, Vienna, Barcelona, he haunted them all like a ghost, his pale figure a constant presence in the darkness, his eyes scanning every face for the one that had captured him so completely. He remembered everything about that night with painful clarity. He had been feeding not from a human, but from one of the blood banks his people maintained, carefully sourced and ethically obtained in exchange for protection and payment. The modern world required modern solutions, and Gavril had adapted where others of his kind had failed. He had been leaving the facility, housed in the basement of what appeared to be a medical supply company when he had scented something unusual on the night air, curiosity, pure unbridled human curiosity, untainted by fear or malice. He had followed the scent to a coffee shop 3 blocks away, one of those small establishments that stayed open until midnight for students and insomniacs. And there she had been, sitting by the window with a laptop and a cup of something that smelled overly sweet, her dark curls falling forward as she typed furiously, occasionally pushing her glasses up her nose with one finger. Gavril had not intended to go inside. He had learned long ago that getting close to humans led to complications. But something about her drew him forward, past the threshold, past the tables of other patrons, until he stood beside her table. "Is this seat taken?" he had asked, knowing full well the shop was half empty. She had looked up, and those gold-flecked eyes had met his without flinching. "Only by you, apparently," she had said, and smiled. They had talked until the barista announced closing time. She was a writer, she told him, working on a novel about vampire politics in the modern age. She had laughed when she said it, self-deprecating and warm. I know, it's been done 1,000 times, but I'm trying to make it feel real, you know? Like, how would ancient creatures actually adapt to credit cards and social media and international law? Perhaps they would build empires beneath cities, Gavril had found himself saying, unable to resist. Hidden courts that mirror human government but operate in shadow. Perhaps they would forge alliances with human institutions, offering protection in exchange for discretion. Her eyes had lit up. That's brilliant. That's exactly the kind of practical thinking I want to include. Most vampire fiction is all drama and romance, but I want the logistics, the reality of it. Why not both? Gavril had asked, leaning forward. Why not drama and romance and reality altogether? She had studied him then, really looked at him, and he had felt exposed in a way he hadn't experienced in centuries. "You're either very knowledgeable about vampire fiction," she had said slowly, "or you're the most interesting person I've met in years." Perhaps I'm both. They had walked together after the coffee shop closed, through Prague's winding streets, past the medieval architecture and over the Charles Bridge, and he had told her the truth. Not because he had planned to, not because it was wise or strategic, but because lying to her felt impossible. He had told her he was a vampire, told her he was over 300 years old, told her he ruled the European courts and that his word was law among his kind. She should have laughed, should have called him crazy and walked away. Instead, she had stopped walking and looked at him with those remarkable eyes. "Prove it," she had said, so he had shown her his fangs, had let his eyes shift to their true predatory silver, had moved with speed that blurred reality, and she had not run. She had stood there on the bridge, with the river flowing beneath them, and the stars hidden by city lights, and she had reached out to touch his face. "You're beautiful," she had whispered. "Terrifying, but beautiful." "I could kill you," he had said, needing her to understand the danger. "But you won't." She had said it with such certainty, such trust, that something in his chest had ached. "I can see it in your eyes. You're not a monster, Gavril. You're just old and lonely." No one had seen through him so easily in 3 centuries. No one had looked past the power and the crown and the carefully constructed image of the vampire king to see the man beneath. He had kissed her then, unable to stop himself. And she had kissed him back with a sweetness that tasted like hope, and then she had vanished. The second year of searching took him across the Atlantic. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, every city with a significant vampire presence became his hunting ground. He questioned ancient vampires who remembered the old ways, young vampires who understood modern technology, and every creature in between. He hired human private investigators, used facial recognition software, accessed databases that were supposed to be impenetrable. Nothing Zara Finch had no family, he discovered. She had been raised in foster care, had aged out of the system at 18, had put herself through university working 2 jobs. She had no close friends, no boyfriend, no anchor tying her to any particular place. She was a ghost in the human world even before she had vanished from his. "Maybe she doesn't want to be found," suggested Eilina, one of his council members, during a meeting in New York. She was ancient, older even than Gavril, with white hair that fell to her waist and eyes like chips of ice. "Maybe she realized what you are, truly understood it, and ran." "She didn't run," Gavril said, his voice hard. "She vanished mid-kiss. That's not running. That's something else. Magic?" Eilina tilted her head. "There are witches who could do such a thing, covens that specialize in concealment and transportation." It was the first lead that made sense. Gavril threw himself into the supernatural underworld with renewed intensity, meeting with witch covens, demon brokers, and fae contacts who owed him favors. He attended gatherings in the spaces between worlds where creatures of all kinds met to trade and bargain. He offered rewards, made threats, called in centuries of debts. A witch in New Orleans finally gave him something useful. There was a spell, she said, her voice raspy with age. 7 years ago, just about. Someone paid a hefty price for a protection spell, a concealment so deep that even the gods couldn't find the protected person. But spells like that don't last forever. They're tied to time and intent. How long? Gavril demanded, his hands gripping the arms of his chair hard enough to splinter the wood. 7 years, the witch said. 7 is a powerful number. After 7 years, the spell breaks and the hidden becomes visible again. 7 years. 7 years of searching, of walking through cities like a man possessed, of lying awake during the day thinking about gold-flecked eyes and vanilla scent, and a kiss that had lasted 7 seconds. 7 years of his council begging him to focus on his duties, of threats from rival clans who sensed weakness, of his empire fraying at the edges because its king had become obsessed with a human woman who had disappeared. But if the witch was right, then in just a few more months, Zara would become findable again. The spell would break, and she would reappear in the world. Gavril returned to Europe with purpose renewed. He strengthened his position, crushed a rebellion in the Eastern Territories with swift and brutal efficiency, reminded every vampire in his domain exactly why he was king. He could not afford to be weak when Zara returned. He needed to be strong enough to protect her from anything, because he had realized something during 7 years of searching. The spell that had hidden her had been cast for a reason. Someone had wanted her gone, had paid significantly to make her vanish. And when she reappeared, that someone might try again, the 7th year came and went. Months passed with agonizing slowness. Gavril returned to Prague, to the city where he had lost her, because instinct told him that was where she would reappear. He walked the same streets they had walked together, stood on the same bridge where they had kissed, waited with the patience of the immortal and the desperation of the damned. On the 7th anniversary of her vanishing, exactly to the day, Gavril stood in the alleyway where he had last seen her. Midnight approached, and the city around him breathed with life and shadow. He closed his eyes, reaching out with every sense he possessed, searching for any change in the fabric of reality. And then he felt it a ripple, a tear, a sudden presence where none had been before. He opened his eyes. Zara stood 3 feet away, looking exactly as she had 7 years ago, wearing the same clothes, her hair in the same style, her expression confused and frightened. She swayed on her feet, and Gavril moved with inhuman speed to catch her before she fell. "Gavril?" she whispered, her voice weak. What happened? We were kissing, and then 7 years happened," he said, his voice rough with emotions he didn't bother to hide. He swept her into his arms, holding her against his chest, feeling her heartbeat strong and steady. Real. She was real. "You've been gone for 7 years. Her eyes widened in shock. "That's impossible. It's been seconds, maybe a minute. I felt dizzy and strange." But she looked around the alleyway, then back at his face, her hands coming up to touch his cheeks as if confirming he was real too. "You're serious? 7 years?" 7 years of searching every city, of tearing apart the supernatural world looking for answers, of going slowly insane without you. He carried her out of the alleyway, moving through Prague's streets toward the secure building that housed the entrance to his underground domain. Someone cast a spell to hide you, to remove you from reality itself. "That spell just broke. Who would do that?" Zara asked, clinging to him. "I don't understand. I'm nobody. I'm just a writer. I don't have money or power, or you have me," Gavril said, his voice turning cold. "Or you would have had me 7 years ago if someone hadn't interfered. That makes you incredibly important to a number of people who would prefer I remain alone and focused on ruling." He carried her down into the depths beneath the city, past security measures both human and magical, past guards who straightened in surprise at seeing their king carrying a human woman, past grand halls and council chambers until he reached his private quarters. He set her down gently on a couch that cost more than most people's cars, then knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I need you to tell me everything about the days before you met me," he said. "Everything you remember, no matter how small or insignificant it seemed. Someone targeted you specifically, which means they were watching me, knew I would meet you, knew we would connect." Zara's mind was clearly reeling, trying to process the impossible. "I was in Prague for research," she said slowly. "For my book. I'd been here about a week, visiting historical sites, taking notes. I remember," she frowned, concentrating. "There was a woman at the library. She asked me what I was researching, and I told her about my vampire novel. She seemed really interested, asked me a lot of questions about my life, my plans. I thought she was just being friendly. What did she look like? Beautiful, elegant. White hair pulled back in this intricate braid, very pale skin, like porcelain. She wore old-fashioned clothes, like something from a period drama. Zara's eyes widened as realization struck. She was a vampire, wasn't she? Gavril's expression turned deadly. Yes. And from your description, I know exactly who she was. He stood pacing away, his hands clenched into fists. Morgana, from the old council before I took power. She's opposed my rule from the beginning, thought I was too progressive, too willing to work with humans instead of dominating them. She made me disappear because of you? Zara's voice held disbelief. Because we were going to meet? Not just meet, bond. Gavril turned back to face her, and his eyes held ancient pain. Vampires don't love easily, Zara. We live too long, see too much, become too jaded. But when we do love, it's absolute, it's consuming, and it's recognizable to others of our kind. He moved back to kneel before her again, his hands gentle as they cupped her face. Morgana must have sensed it somehow, must have known that you were going to be important to me. She removed you before that bond could truly form. But why? Zara asked, tears forming in her eyes. What threat could I possibly pose? A vampire king with a human queen would change everything, Gavril said softly. It would mean alliances with human governments, full integration into modern society, the end of the old ways of hiding and hunting. Morgana and her faction want vampires to remain separate, superior, untouchable. You threaten that entire worldview. Zara was silent for a long moment, processing. Then she asked the question that had clearly been building. Do you still feel it? The bond? After 7 years? Gavril's laugh was bitter and genuine. I've felt nothing else for 7 years. I've walked the earth like a madman, searching for you in every face, every shadow. I've neglected my duties, nearly lost my throne, made enemies of creatures I should have kept as allies. All for the chance to find you again. He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing in her scent. So yes, Zara Finch, I still feel it. The question is whether you do. I was gone for 7 years, she whispered. But for me, it's been minutes. And in those minutes, I kissed you and felt something I've never felt before. Like coming home. Like finding something I didn't know I'd lost. Her hands came up to cover his. So yes, I feel it. But Gavril, I need you to understand I'm human. I'm going to age and die. And you're going to live forever. This bond or connection or whatever it is, it's not practical. It can't work long term. There are ways, Gavril said immediately. Vampirism can be given, if both parties consent. You could become... Could we not make that decision right now? Zara interrupted gently. I just lost 7 years of my life. I need time to process that before I start thinking about losing my humanity. It was the right thing to say, the reasonable thing to say, and Gavril forced himself to respect it, even though every instinct screamed at him to bind her to him immediately, to make her immortal so she could never be taken away again. Of course, he said, pulling back slightly, but you need to understand, you're in danger. Morgana cast that spell 7 years ago. And it only lasted 7 years because that was the limit of the magic she could buy or create. Now that you're back, she'll try again, Zara finished. Or worse, Gavril agreed. Which means you stay here, in the heart of my domain, under my protection. No one can reach you here without going through me and every vampire loyal to my throne. So I'm a prisoner? There was no accusation in her voice, just curiosity. You're protected, Gavril corrected. There's a difference. You can go anywhere in the castle. Meet my people, access anything you need. But you cannot leave without significant security, and you cannot be alone where Morgana's agents might reach you. Zara looked around the luxurious room, taking in the ancient tapestries and modern amenities blended seamlessly together. This is insane, she said. A week ago or 7 years ago, depending on how you count, I was just a struggling writer trying to finish a novel. Now I'm in a vampire castle being protected by the vampire king from other vampires who want me dead. Is this the part where you run screaming? Gavril asked, trying to keep his tone light despite the very real fear that she might do exactly that. She met his eyes, and a small smile played at her lips. I was never very good at running. Besides, you're excellent research material. How many writers get to actually live in a vampire court? My novel is going to be incredibly authentic now. Despite everything, despite the danger and the fear and the uncertainty, Gavril laughed. It was genuine and surprised, the first time he had truly laughed in 7 years. You're remarkable, he said. I'm hungry, she corrected, and tired, and still processing the fact that it's apparently 7 years in the future, and I've missed, oh God, I've missed 7 years of everything. The reality was hitting her now, color draining from her face. My apartment, my things, my do I even legally exist anymore? What happened to my identity, my bank accounts, my breathe? Gavril commanded gently, taking her hands again. One thing at a time. First, food and rest. Then we'll deal with the practical matters. I promise you, we can fix the human bureaucracy issues. I've been alive for 3 centuries. I know how to navigate mortal systems." He called for servants, and within minutes they brought food, real human food, carefully prepared. Zara ate while Gavril watched, still unable to fully believe she was here, real and solid and alive in front of him. They talked about small things, inconsequential things, letting her adjust gradually to the impossible situation. Finally, exhaustion claimed her. Gavril carried her to his own bed. He didn't sleep in it anyway, preferring to rest during the day in a more secure chamber, and watched as she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. He positioned himself in a chair by the door, guarding her through what remained of the night, his mind already working through the problem of Morgana and her faction. They would come for Zara again. That was certain. The only question was when and how. The answer came 3 days later. Zara had been adjusting to life in the castle, meeting the vampires of Gavril's court with a combination of fear and fascination that made him admire her courage even more. She asked questions constantly about their lives, their histories, the structure of vampire society. She took notes. She was writing again, she told him, but now her novel felt more like a memoir of impossible experiences. Gavril was in a council meeting when the attack came. The first warning was an explosion that rocked the foundations of the castle, followed by the sound of fighting above. He moved with supernatural speed, abandoning the meeting room and racing toward his chambers, where Zara had said she would spend the afternoon writing. He found chaos. A team of vampires he didn't recognize, mercenaries. By the look of them, pale-haired and vicious, were fighting through his guards. At the center of the formation, directing them with cold precision, was Morgana herself. She looked exactly as she had a century ago when Gavril had defeated her and taken the throne, beautiful and terrible, with eyes that held no mercy. "She doesn't belong in our world," Morgana said when she saw him, not even bothering with preamble. "You've gone soft, Gavril." "A human? You would bond with a human and call her queen? It's an abomination. It's evolution," Gavril shot back, moving to put himself between Morgana's forces and his chambers. "The world has changed, Morgana. We either change with it or we die out. Humans outnumber us 1,000,000 to 1. We survive by adaptation, not domination. We survive by being superior." Morgana's voice rose to a shout. "We are the apex predators, not them. You would make us equal to our food?" "I would make us something more than monsters hiding in shadows," Gavril said. Behind him, he could hear the door to his chambers opening, could sense Zara stepping out. "Don't," he said without turning. "Stay inside." "She has a right to hear this." Zara's voice came from behind him, steady despite the danger. "Since it's about me." Morgana's eyes fixed on Zara with hatred so intense it was almost physical. "You, a nothing, a mortal who will be dust in a few decades. And he would reshape our entire society for you?" "He would reshape it for the future," Zara said, and Gavril felt a surge of pride at her courage. "Because what you're doing, living in the past, it's not sustainable. The world knows vampires exist. There are conspiracy theories, there are hunters, there are people getting close to the truth. You can't hide forever. Gavril's trying to build something that will let vampires survive openly, peacefully." "Peacefully?" Morgana laughed. The sound like breaking glass. "We are vampires. We are not meant for peace. Then you're meant for extinction," Zara said simply. "Because peace is the only way forward." Morgana moved faster than human eyes could track, crossing the distance between them in a blur of speed and fury. But Gavril was faster. He caught her mid-lunge, his hand around her throat, slamming her into the stone wall with enough force to create cracks in the ancient rock. "You will not touch her," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more threatening than any shout. "You will not look at her, think about her, or speak her name. Because if you do, I will end you, Morgana. Council member or not, ancient or not. I will destroy you completely. You would kill me for a human?" Morgana choked out, her own hands clawing at his grip. "I would kill anyone for her," Gavril said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "She is mine to protect, mine to cherish. And if you cannot accept that, then you cannot exist in my world." The fighting had stopped. Morgana's mercenaries stood frozen, watching their leader dangling from Gavril's grip. His own guards surrounded them, weapons drawn, waiting for his command. The entire castle seemed to hold its breath. "You have a choice," Gavril continued, his eyes locked on Morgana's. "Accept that I am king, and this is my decision. Accept that Zara Finch is under my protection, and will remain so. Bend the knee and swear fealty, truly this time, or refuse and die here now, knowing that you tried to destroy something beautiful because you couldn't see past your own prejudice." For a long moment, Morgana stared back with defiance and hatred. Then slowly her expression shifted, not to acceptance, but to calculation. She stopped struggling, let her hands drop from his grip. "I yield," she said hoarsely. You are king. It is your right to make foolish decisions. Gavril released her, stepping back but keeping himself between her and Zara. Foolish or not, it's my decision, and you will respect it. Morgana straightened her clothes with as much dignity as she could muster. The old council will not accept this easily. Then the old council can be replaced, Gavril said coldly. I've been too lenient, allowing dissent out of respect for tradition, but tradition without adaptation is just slow death. Anyone who cannot move forward with me can step aside, or be removed. Dominic added from behind Morgana's mercenaries, his own weapon still drawn. Morgana looked around at the assembled vampires, calculating her odds. They were not good. Finally, she nodded once, sharply. I will take my leave then. To consider my position, you do that, Gavril said. And, Morgana, the spell you cast 7 years ago, I want to know who helped you. What witch or warlock was powerful enough to remove someone from reality itself? Morgana's smile was bitter. You think I'll betray my allies? I think you'll do whatever serves your survival, Gavril said. And right now, cooperation serves you better than defiance. She was silent for another moment, then sighed. The Volkov Coven, in Russia, they specialize in time magic, displacement spells. I paid them everything I had saved over 3 centuries. And how did you know to target Zara before I had even met her? Oracles, Morgana said simply. There's a seer in Athens who reads the threads of fate. She told me a human would come who would change everything, who would bind the king and reform vampire society. She described Zara exactly the dark curls, the gold eyes, the writer who researches what she cannot possibly know. I simply found her first. Gavril absorbed this information, filing it away for later action. The Volkov Coven would need to be dealt with, and the seer in Athens. But right now, the immediate threat needed to be neutralized. Go, he told Morgana. Take your mercenaries and go. But know that if you come against me again, against her again, I will show no mercy. Ancient laws be damned, council tradition be damned. She is mine, and I am hers. And that is the end of it. Morgana departed with her forces, and the tension in the castle slowly eased. Gavril turned to find Zara standing pale but composed, her arms wrapped around herself. Without a word, he crossed to her and pulled her into his embrace. You're shaking, he murmured against her hair. I was terrified, she admitted, but I wasn't going to let her see it, and I wasn't going to hide while you fought for me. Brave and foolish, Gavril said, but there was warmth in his voice. What if I hadn't been fast enough? But you were. Zara pulled back to look up at him. And you'll keep being fast enough, won't you? Because that's who you are. The vampire king who protects his people. I'm also just Gavril, he said quietly, a man who has lived too long and seen too much, who thought he would never feel anything real again. Until you. She reached up to touch his face, tracing the sharp lines of his cheekbones, the cold pallor of his skin. What happens now? Morgana's gone, but not defeated. She'll regroup, find other ways to come at us. Then we become stronger than she can fight, Gavril said. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I meant what I said in there. You're mine to protect. But more than that, you're mine to love, if you'll have me. 7 years ago, we had 3 hours and 1 kiss. I'm asking for more now. I'm asking for time to court you properly, to show you what we could be together. In a castle full of vampires while political enemies plot against us, Zara asked, but she was smiling. I never promised it would be boring, Gavril said, and kissed her again, properly this time, without interruption or magical interference. She kissed him back with enthusiasm, her warm human body pressing against his cold immortal one, and for the first time in 7 years, Gavril felt something like peace. The following weeks were a strange blend of danger and domesticity. Gavril taught Zara about vampire politics, introducing her to allies and potential supporters. Many of the vampires were skeptical at first. A human in the castle, in the king's own chambers, was unprecedented, but Zara had a gift for connecting with people, even immortal ones. She asked questions that showed genuine interest rather than fear. She listened to their stories, remembered their names, treated each vampire as an individual rather than a monster. Slowly, the court began to accept her. Elena, the ancient council member who had suggested Zara might not want to be found, became one of her strongest supporters. She has wisdom beyond her years, Elena told Gavril privately. She understands that power comes not just from strength, but from compassion. You chose well, my king. Gavril spent every moment he could with Zara. He showed her the parts of the castle that were centuries old, told her stories of vampire history that no human had ever heard. She shared her writing with him, her novel that was now half fiction and half memoir. They talked through the nights and into the early mornings, until the sun forced him to retreat to his protected chambers while she slept in his bed. It's strange. Zara said one evening as they sat together in his private library, surrounded by books that predated printing presses. I should be more frightened than I am. I'm living with vampires. I've been attacked. I was literally removed from reality for 7 years. But when I'm with you, I feel safe. That's the bond, Gavril explained, though his hand tightened on hers as he said it. It's not magic exactly, but it's something vampires feel when we find someone who truly matters. It draws us together, makes us protective, possessive even. And I feel it too, Zara said softly. I thought at first it was just attraction, or maybe some kind of supernatural influence. But it's more than that. When you're near, the world makes sense. When you're away, even just in another room, I feel incomplete. Does that frighten you? She considered. It should, but mostly it just feels right. She turned to face him fully. Gavril, we need to talk about the future. Real talk, not dancing around it. His expression became guarded. All right, I'm human. I'm going to age. In 10 years, I'll be 33 and starting to show it. In 20, I'll be middle-aged. In 40, if I'm lucky, I'll be an old woman. And you'll still look exactly like this. She gestured to his ageless face. That's not sustainable for a relationship. I've told you, there are options. I know. Vampirism. But Gavril, that's not a decision I can make lightly. Becoming a vampire means giving up everything human. It means drinking blood, avoiding sunlight, living forever, watching everyone I might care about die. It means becoming something fundamentally different than what I am now. I know. His voice was quiet, pained. And I won't force it. I would never force it. But Zara, the alternative is watching you age and die, and I don't know if I can survive that. Not after 7 years of searching for you. What if there was a middle ground? Zara asked. I've been researching, yes, research. In your library it's amazing, and there are mentions of something called a blood bond. Not full vampirism, but a connection that extends human life, slows aging. The human doesn't become a vampire, but gains some benefits of vampiric blood. Gavril's expression was carefully neutral. Blood bonds are complicated. They tie two people together irrevocably. The human becomes dependent on the vampire's blood, needs it regularly to maintain the benefits. It's intimate and permanent. More permanent than what we already have? Zara asked gently. Gavril, I'm not going anywhere. I know we've only really known each other for a few weeks, but I've made my choice. I want to be with you. I just need time before I'm ready to give up my humanity completely. A blood bond would give us that time. It would, Gavril admitted. Years, possibly decades, where you would age very slowly. Enough time for you to be certain. Then let's do it. He studied her face, looking for doubt or fear. You're sure? Once started, a blood bond is difficult to break. You would need my blood regularly, monthly at minimum, and it would deepen what we already feel, make the connection even stronger. I'm sure, Zara said. I love you, Gavril. I don't remember deciding to love you. It just happened, probably in that coffee shop 7 years ago, and I want a life with you, whatever form that takes. Gavril pulled her into his arms, holding her with a gentleness that belied his strength. I love you too, he said, the words foreign on his tongue after centuries of not saying them. I will spend every day proving worthy of the trust you're placing in me. The blood bond ritual was performed that night, private and sacred, with only Eilina present as witness. Gavril explained each step carefully, making sure Zara understood what was happening. He bit his own wrist, let his blood dark and rich with vampiric power well up, and offered it to her. It will taste strange, he warned, and you may feel dizzy, disoriented. The bond will form immediately, and you'll feel everything I feel for a moment. Zara didn't hesitate. She pressed her lips to his wrist and drank, and Gavril felt the bond snap into place like a lock clicking home. For a moment they were one being, one consciousness. He felt her love, her fear, her determination. She felt his devotion, his protectiveness, his 300-year-old loneliness finally filled. Then the moment passed, and they were separate again, but connected in a way that would last as long as the bond held. Zara gasped, pulling back, and Gavril caught her as she swayed. I feel you, she whispered. In my head, in my heart. You're everywhere. And you're in me, Gavril said, marveling at the sensation. He had heard of blood bonds but never formed one himself. It was overwhelming and perfect. We're linked now. I'll always be able to find you and you me. Good. Zara said, smiling despite her disorientation, because I'm not vanishing again. With the blood bond established, Zara's place in the castle became official. Gavril commissioned a ring for her, not an engagement ring exactly, since vampire customs didn't quite align with human marriage, but a symbol of their bond. It was silver, set with a stone that matched the color of his eyes, and when he slipped it onto her finger, every vampire in the court understood that she was untouchable. But Morgana had not been idle. Reports came of her gathering support among the older, more traditional vampires. She was building a coalition, arguing that Gavril's attachment to a human made him unfit to rule. There were whispers of a challenge, an ancient right that would allow her to duel him for the throne. "Let her come," Gavril said coldly during a council meeting. "I've been too patient with dissent. If Morgana wants the throne, she can try to take it." "A formal challenge would mean a duel to the death," Dominic warned. "Old rules, no interference, no mercy. And my lord, Morgana is ancient. She's powerful in ways that many of us are not. I am the Vampire King," Gavril said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "I didn't win this throne by being weak. If Morgana wants to test me, she'll discover exactly how I maintained power for a century." The challenge came a week later, delivered by one of Morgana's supporters. A formal declaration, written in the old language, demanding single combat for the throne. The date was set for the next new moon, in the ancient arena beneath the castle, where such challenges had been settled for millennia. Zara was terrified, though she tried to hide it. "What if you lose?" she asked Gavril the night before the duel, lying beside him in the darkness. "I won't lose," he said simply. "But what if you do? What happens to me? You're blood bonded to me. If I die, the bond breaks." "But you'll live. You'll be human again, free of this world." He turned to face her, his eyes serious. "Dominic has instructions to get you out safely, to return you to the human world with enough money to start over. You'll be protected. I don't want to start over." Zara said fiercely, "I want you to win. I want us to have our life together." "Then trust that I will do everything in my considerable power to make that happen," Gavril said, kissing her forehead. "I've lived for 300 years, survived countless challenges, built an empire from ashes. I'm not going to lose to Morgana." The arena was ancient, carved from living rock deep beneath the castle. It had witnessed centuries of vampire conflicts, the stones stained with blood that could never be fully washed away. Vampires from across Europe had gathered to witness the challenge, filling the tiered seats that surrounded the circular fighting ground. This was more than a duel, it was a statement about the future of vampire society. Gavril stood in the center of the arena, dressed simply in black, his white hair loose around his shoulders. Across from him, Morgana wore ceremonial armor, pieces of it clearly ancient, enchanted with old magic that would provide some protection. She looked confident, certain of victory. "You still have a chance to yield," Morgana called out, her voice carrying through the arena. "Renounce the human. Send her away. Return to proper vampire traditions. Do this, and I will let you keep the throne. I would rather die," Gavril said, simply, and meant it. Zara watched from the king's box, flanked by Alina and Dominic, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. Through the bond, she could feel Gavril's calm determination, his absolute confidence. It should have reassured her. Instead, it terrified her, because she knew he would rather die than live without her, and that was both beautiful and horrible. The duel began at midnight, signaled by the ringing of an ancient bell. Morgana moved first, striking with speed that blurred reality. Her claws extended and aimed at Gavril's throat. He dodged, moving with equal speed, and the fight became a dance of supernatural quickness that human eyes could barely follow. They were matched in speed, but not in strength. Gavril was younger as a vampire, transformed only 300 years ago, while Morgana was nearly twice that age. Age meant power in the vampire world, meant accumulated strength and refined abilities. But Gavril had something Morgana lacked: absolute certainty of purpose. He fought not just for the throne, but for Zara, for the future they had planned, for the possibility of something new and beautiful in a world that was ancient and often cruel. Every strike he made was precise, calculated, drawing on 300 years of combat experience and a century of ruling through strength. The fight lasted an hour. Blood stained the arena floor, both of them were wounded, healing and fighting and wounding again in a cycle of violence that was terrible to witness. Morgana was powerful, her experience showing in every move. But Gavril was relentless, pushing past pain, past exhaustion, past every reasonable limit. Finally, he saw his opening. Morgana overextended on a strike, confident in her superior age, and Gavril moved inside her guard. His hand closed around her throat, his other hand gripping her wrist, and he lifted her off her feet with brutal strength. "Yield," he commanded, his voice echoing through the suddenly silent arena. Morgana struggled, her free hand clawing at his face, drawing blood. "Never. Then you've chosen death," Gavril said, and there was genuine regret in his voice. "I offered you a place in the new world. You refused. I offered you mercy. You spat on it. This is your doing, Morgana, not mine." He tightened his grip, and there was a terrible crack. Morgana's body went limp, her ancient life ending in a moment of swift violence. Gavril held her for a moment longer, then let her fall to the arena floor. He stood over her body, breathing heavily, covered in blood, both his and hers. "This is my throne," he said, his voice carrying to every vampire present. "Mine by right of conquest, mine by right of strength. I am your king, and my word is law. And my word is this: we move forward. We adapt. We integrate with the human world, or we die out like the dinosaurs. Any who cannot accept this are free to leave my territories. But any who stay will follow my rules, accept my decisions, including my choice of mate." He looked up at the king's box, his eyes finding Zara's. "I choose her. I will always choose her. And if anyone else wants to challenge that choice, step forward now." The arena was silent. No one moved. After a long moment, Eilina stood in the king's box and began to applaud, slow and deliberate. One by one, other vampires joined her, until the entire arena echoed with the sound of acceptance. Gavril climbed out of the arena, moving directly to the king's box where Zara waited. She threw herself into his arms, not caring that he was covered in blood, that he was cold and dangerous and not human. "You won," she whispered against his chest. "I told you I would," he said, holding her tightly. "I told you I wouldn't lose. Not when I have something worth fighting for." The aftermath of the duel was complex. Morgana's death left a power vacuum in the old council, one that Gavril filled with vampires who supported his vision. He restructured vampire government across Europe, establishing new rules that emphasized cooperation with humans rather than dominance over them. It was radical, it was difficult, and it took months of careful political maneuvering. Through it all, Zara was at his side. She became known among the vampire community as the Human Queen, though she never took an official title. She advised Gavril, offering perspective that only a human could provide. She became a bridge between the vampire world and the human one, helping to establish the first formal contacts between vampire courts and human governments. Her novel was published 18 months after her return, under a pseudonym. It became an unexpected bestseller, praised for its realistic portrayal of vampire politics and the complex integration of supernatural beings into modern society. Critics called it brilliant world-building. Only a select few knew it was barely fictionalized memoir. On the second anniversary of her return, Gavril took her back to Prague, to the bridge where they had first kissed. The city sparkled with lights, beautiful and alive, the same but different from that night 7 years before. "I've been thinking," Zara said, leaning against the stone railing, looking out over the river. "About the future, about what I want. And what do you want?" Gavril asked, though through the bond he could feel the shape of her thoughts. "I want forever with you," she said, turning to face him. "I've had 2 years to adjust, to understand what being a vampire means. I've watched your people, learned your ways, lived in your world. And I've decided I'm ready. Turn me, make me truly yours." "Are you certain?" Gavril asked, his hands coming up to cup her face. "Once done, it cannot be undone. You'll be a vampire immortal, with all the benefits and burdens that brings." "I'm certain," Zara said. "I want to stand beside you not as the fragile human who needs protection, but as your equal. I want centuries to love you, to build this new world with you. I want forever." Gavril. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring 300 years of loneliness and 2 years of love into the contact. When he pulled back, his fangs were extended, his eyes silver with vampiric power. "It will hurt," he warned. "The transformation is not gentle." "I trust you," Zara said simply. "I've trusted you from the beginning." Gavril bit her then, not on the neck but on the wrist, where the pulse beat strongest. He drank deeply, taking enough blood to bring her to the edge of death, then bit his own wrist and pressed it to her mouth. "Drink," he commanded. "Drink and be reborn." She drank, his ancient blood flowing into her, beginning the transformation. Gavril held her as her body began to change, as her heart slowed and stopped, as death came and was cheated. It took hours, the transformation working through every cell, rewriting her humanity into something immortal. When she opened her eyes again, they were silver like his, predatory and beautiful. Her skin had paled to alabaster, and her hair seemed darker by contrast. She was still Zara, still herself, but also something more, something eternal. "How do you feel?" Gavril asked, supporting her as she adjusted to her new senses, her new strength. "Powerful," she said, marveling. "Everything is so clear, so bright. I can hear the water in the river, smell the humans blocks away, feel the night itself." She looked at him, her new vampire eyes taking in details she had never noticed before. "And I can feel you, even stronger than before. You're in my blood, in my bones, as you are in mine," Gavril said. "My love, my mate, my queen in all but name." "Then make it official," Zara said, smiling with her new fangs showing. "Don't vampires have some kind of bonding ceremony? Let's do it. Let's make this forever official." They were married, vampire style, a month later. It was a ceremony that combined ancient vampire traditions with modern sensibilities, held in the grand hall beneath Prague, with vampires from across the world attending. Zara wore white, defying the expectations of vampire mourning colors, because this was a celebration, not a funeral. Gavril wore black with silver thread, and when they spoke their vows' ancient words in a language that predated most modern tongues, the bond between them became something sacred, recognized by every vampire present. "I vow to stand beside you through all the centuries to come," Gavril said, his voice carrying through the hall. "To protect you, cherish you, and love you with every drop of blood in my veins." "I vow to be your partner, your equal, your conscience when you need one," Zara said. "To bring light to your darkness, laughter to your eternity, and love that never fades." So they sealed the vows with blood, each drinking from the other, binding themselves in ways that were both legal and mystical. When they kissed, the entire hall erupted in celebration, vampires and select human guests cheering for the impossible union. Years passed, then decades. The vampire world slowly transformed under Gavril and Zara's combined leadership. They established formal relations with human governments, created laws that protected both species, built a world where vampires no longer needed to hide in shadow. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, challenges, vampires who resisted change, and humans who feared the supernatural. But together, they persevered. Zara wrote more novels, each one exploring different aspects of the integrated world they were building. She became famous in both human and vampire circles, a voice for cooperation and understanding. Gavril remained king, but his reign softened, became known for justice rather than just strength. Together, they became a symbol of what was possible when different worlds chose to meet in love rather than fear. On the 50th anniversary of the night Gavril had first met Zara in that coffee shop, they returned to Prague once more. The city had changed, as all cities do, but the bridge remained, and the river, and the memory of that first meeting. "I still remember being terrified," Zara said, her vampire senses letting her recall every detail with perfect clarity. "Not of you, but of what you represented, the unknown, the impossible." "And now?" Gavril asked, pulling her close. "Now you're my home," she said simply. "You're my past, my present, and my future. You're everything. I searched for you for 7 years, Gavril said, echoing words from decades before. 7 years of going slowly insane without you. And now I have you forever. Forever, Zara agreed, and kissed him beneath the stars, in the city where their impossible love had begun. "That's exactly how long I intend to stay." They stood together on the bridge. 2 white-haired figures in dark clothing, immortal and in love. The world spun around them, constantly changing, but they remained constant, the vampire king and his queen, the centuries stretching before them like an open road, filled with endless possibility and unending love. The night was young, as were they, despite decades having passed. They had forever to love each other, and forever was exactly what they intended to use. No more vanishing, no more searching. Just the 2 of them, together, building a world where love between different species was not just possible, but celebrated. And in the darkness beneath the city, in the grand halls of the vampire court, their people celebrated with them, toasting to the king and queen who had changed everything. The old ways were gone, replaced by something better. Something that honored both vampire and human, that recognized strength and compassion and power in love. Gavril and Zara had spent 7 years apart, but they had eternity together. And that was the greatest victory of all, not won through violence or power, but through patience, trust, and a love that had refused to die, even when separated by magic and time. They had found each other, chosen each other, and transformed each other's worlds, and they would never let go again.